Hi there, and thanks for joining us for a Crisis Support Solutions webinar. Today's topic, we unveil the 6-part protocol for providing one-on-one support. There is an accompanying handout that goes along with this webinar, so if you haven't done so already, be sure to jump over to crisissupportsolutions.com/webinar-refresh. The password is webinar 2018, and be sure to download the free wallet card as you join us for this webinar. Thanks so much for being here. Hope you enjoy it. All right. So we're doing the 6-part protocol for one-on-one support, and you'll see it's all listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to go through those today. We're not going to, hopefully you're going to see a lot of this as refresh for you. So we're not going to spend a lot of time teaching it, because all 6 parts that we teach in our training, it takes 2 full days to teach this stuff. Okay. So we're not, obviously we don't have 2 full days on this webinar to be together. So we're going to just give you a brief overview as we go. Again, the webinar is to introduce this tool for you to use when you're talking with people that need support. A couple of things I want you to notice is that it goes in a loop, so to speak, and we'll, let's go here. I'm getting used to my pen tool again. So a couple of things I want you to notice, and I'm going to keep kind of popping back between these slides. There is a start and there is a finish as it goes. So it goes from 1 and it goes to 6. The teaching point to that is in peer support, you actually do have a stopping point. You actually do have a finishing point. This is not a circle. This is not a loop that keeps going around and around and around. You have a starting place, a place where you begin your conversation, and you have a place where you end your conversation. Okay, so that's the first thing to know, that your conversation eventually ends, and also your support for the individual eventually ends. If it doesn't, we'll talk about that on how to make a referral. The other thing I want you to notice is the semicircle of this, that I'm borrowing it from Dr. Jeffrey T. Mitchell. And let me get to my drawing here. And what I want you to notice is what I just drew out is that it goes down and then it comes right back up. And so think about a swimming pool. The way that I know I jump in the swimming pool is straight to the deep end. But instead, let's take a look at it from a shallow end. So from, you just gradually go in to into the pool, you wade into the pool. And Jeffrey, Dr. Mitchell talks about this as we're talking, we meet them from a thinking perspective or a cognitive perspective. And we're going to go into these 6 things in a second. But then you go gradually into, you get deeper in the conversation, deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that gets into feelings. I know, the famous F word. Feelings we talk about. So Dr. Mitchell talks about the cognitive into the emotional part of it, and then back out, but you don't leave them there. You don't leave them in feeling. So here they are. You're asking, for example, what's the worst part of this so far? And they say, oh, I can't, I'm really struggling with the loss of so-and-so. And so you identify grief. You talk about grief, and then you don't go, well, take care of yourself and head out. That's I'm not going to say unethical, but certainly unkind. So we have to lead them back out of the deep end, so to speak, and bring them back out, and what Dr. Mitchell talks about, back into a cognitive or a thinking place. So there, if you want to think about it from the brain perspective, we're going left side, right side, left side again. We're going analytical to feeling, back into analytical again. And by analytical, we'll talk about in a bit how you're giving them a plan of action, or you're talking about creating a plan. And so you're leading them back into their left brain, that they can actually then give them something to do as you leave them, and then follow up with them later on. So it has good reason for being in the shape that it's in. That's something for you to keep that in mind. And there's a picture of the swimming pool, as I just mentioned. And then finally, the final overview of this is it's a generalist perspective. That may be familiar language to some of you. From a generalist, social work always talks about being a generalist perspective versus a specialized perspective. This model is designed to meet anyone, anywhere, exactly as they are. Anyone. Joey's going to talk about mild, moderate, and severe. This model is designed to meet anyone for any reason exactly as they are. But we also need to get into specifics when there is a special need or a special issue that arises. The one that comes up for me is suicide intervention. Some of you guys are familiar with the suicide intervention. In fact, I'll do a quick plug. Go back to the webinar refresh training, and you'll see not just today's webinar, you'll see the webinar we did a couple of months ago, and then keep scrolling down and you get an opportunity to see Joey's presenting the suicide intervention model. I've already given a shout out to Dr. Mitchell. I'll give a shout out now to Dr. Everly. We use the CCDR model. We borrow that from him, and you can see that there. So, but this model goes with that other model. So this is kind of the large umbrella, and then you need to do suicide intervention. And you'll see when you start to do a plan of action, you'll start to explore. You need to ask that question, that one question. Are you considering harming yourself? Sorry, not that question. That's the opposite question. Are you considering taking your own life? Are you thinking about killing yourself? So you'll see that it's the same model that we go through, but it's going to be more specific when you're dealing with more specific issues. Okay. So again, this is from a general perspective, but it should be good for anyone, anytime with any issue that they're dealing with. The last thing I'll say on this slide is there is a separate protocol for groups in crisis. This is a one-on-one model only. You see that right here. One-on-one model only. We have a very specific, oops, let me go back. We have a very specific protocol and a different protocol when we're dealing with groups. So if you haven't taken our group crisis training yet and you want to work with a team and go and work with groups in crisis, then that's a different protocol for that. So today we're only talking about working one-on-one with individuals. And by the way, this model works whether you're sitting in front of them over a cup of coffee at a coffee shop, or if you're on the phone as well. Okay, let's get into the heart of this, and then we'll get one more overview, and then hand it to Joey to start us off into the 6 steps. The last point here is, I mentioned there's a starting point and there is an ending point, or there's a start and there's a finish line. When people are starting out, this is just a reminder that typically, if they're talking to you, if they're willing to talk to you, especially those of you that work in law enforcement, if they're willing to talk with you, are they in a good place? Or are they in a not good place? Are they in a happy place or a not happy place? Are they feeling very positive about their life? Are they feeling pretty negative about the situation that they're going through? People are trying to find the unmute button. Let's go ahead and say they are in a not good place. So for those of you that we've been through training together, you've heard me say 100% of the people I have worked with, 100% of the time, had 2 things in common. Number 1, they didn't feel good when we were talking. They didn't feel good. And number 2, they wanted to feel better 100% of the time. So when you're starting out with this person, recognize that they're probably coming from a place, and you'll hear that once they start talking with you, negative outlook, depressed mood. That doesn't mean depression. That's not a clinical diagnosis I'm giving. That just means that their their mood is not elevated like they want it to be. They're not in a happy place. Depression is also has a lot to do with anxiety. So instead of they may not be looking sad. My go-to is when I'm more anxious than I'm ever depressed, because I don't like to be sad and solemn. I much prefer to be buzzing and energized. So my depressed or down mood actually presents a lot like anxious energy. So it doesn't mean that they have to be sad. They're feeling isolated. They may be isolating themselves. And so when you walk up and say, "How's it going, Jim?" I'm fine, it's okay, I don't want to talk about, that kind of stuff. So they may be isolating themselves versus moving towards help, feeling not very confident. If they felt confident about tackling the issues in front of them, they would tackle the issues in front of them. So there's some things that we can already presuppose in this relationship as we're getting started with this individual. If they felt that they had options, they would take them. If they felt like they could do this on their own, they probably would. That kind of thing. So I just want to give us, as we get grounded into this model, just a starting point for what we can kind of expect when we're sitting in front of people, what they might be going through and from a general perspective. Okay, Joey, start us off on part one of this.
Okay, so part one, which is show up. The first thing out of the 6 different steps that we're going to take through this process is to show up and build rapport. And we know that not everyone shows up, and not everyone is called to show up. But I feel like that because you're on this call, because you've been in one of our trainings, because you were, for some, basically selected to be a peer, that you are called to show up. But actually showing up involves that empathetic response, that you are sort of putting yourself in the position that the folks that you're in front of are in, so that you can, begin to identify with what they're bringing to you. We want to always acknowledge what's going on with a person by validating them, and we'll talk a little bit more about validation as we work through this. I think if you've heard it once, you've heard it a million times from us, that we certainly validate first and validate always, and we want to do that right off the bat because it's one of the best ways to build rapport with someone, and we want them to hurt less. Just as Dory was saying, we discovered they're hurting and they want to feel better, or they probably wouldn't be in front of you to begin with. Our presence is certainly important, and just like we talked about, just to be on this webinar, to be present with someone is giving them that undivided attention. So it's not sitting in front of them and checking your phone if it buzzes. But even beyond that is not being judgmental or criticizing or even offering advice. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to listen and maybe offer some suggestions when it comes to strengths and resources that are available to them. But if someone comes along and tells you that they're struggling, we want to introduce that part and say, well, I'm a peer and I'm here to help you. Or if somebody comes to you and says, this person I know is struggling, it may be you taking that first step to even reach out, especially if you already have a relationship with them. Click that next slide. All right. So we want to identify our role when we show up. As a peer, many of you have, you've been through the training and you know what that means to identify your role and who you are, sort of setting the ground rules of making that introduction, whether it's on the phone or in person. That begins to build that rapport as to, why you're there and what your role is as a peer. It's not a therapist, it's not a counselor, but it's someone to listen and offer some suggestions according to the severity of what's going on. Providing confidentiality, a statement for those of you who've been in our classes that be different agency to agency. And if you don't know what that is, which I think most everybody on the phone call knows what that is, but if you don't have a specific statement, you certainly want to use your policy from your program coordinator within your agency to know what that is. For some, confidentiality is basically, I'm here to listen to you and I will not break confidence unless you threaten to hurt yourself or someone else. For some agencies, that extends on out to some legal issues of breaking the law, those types of things. So, make sure that you're on point with your policies to do that. And then the final thing of showing up is finding an opening. How do we open it up? And one of the things that Dory and I talk about is I'm going to start with what to avoid first, and that's asking somebody, do you want to talk about it? That's a good way to get somebody to throw a wall up and go, not really, I don't really want to talk about it. I'm just kind of here with you. We can make the assumption if they're sitting in front of you or have come to you or called you as a peer, they probably do want to talk about it. It's not really a question you need to ask. But some of the examples we put in here is maybe, what's going on with you? or here you got some things going on. I'm sorry to hear about such and such. You may know the story. You may know that they've lost a loved one. You may know that they're being transferred, whatever the situation may be. But I'm really sorry to hear that you're struggling with this. Where do you want to start? And just open up that door after that rapport has been built with the initial showing up process.
Good. Thanks, Joey.
Mm-hmm.
Part 2 is lean in. So show up is the first, like Joey just covered. And by the way, I'll add, not everybody shows up. So please don't, as peers and chaplains, please do not take that for granted. Well, what's the big deal? Not everybody shows up. And the fact that you do is commendable and remarkable in a lot of ways. So thank you for showing up. Part 2 is lean in. And this is your listen part, even though part 3 says listen out. Leaning in, sorry, I don't want to confuse you on that, but we kind of take 1, 2, and 3 all together. Show up, lean in, listen out. And lean in is the questioning part of this. It's a mindset. It's intentionally blocking out, like Joey just talked about, everything else, that when you're with that person, in front of that person, you are there with them. I was going through a seminar with a clinician, and he said, which captured my attention. He said, the person in front of me in that moment is the most important person in my life. And I thought, wow, you have my attention, because I think there are a lot of important people in my life. The people in my home are the most important people in my life. But he went on to say, just think about that. This person is the person that's in front of you. And for this moment in time, I want them to know they're the most important person. They have my undivided attention. So I'll leave that with you to decide and judge if you think that works for you. But his point to me was well taken, of be present with that person, like Joey just talked about. Hear what they're saying, listen without interrupting. Listen without interrupting. Get quiet and get curious. And when you have a question, ask the questions. We give you a 4-hour block on communication and asking questions. So you may remember I hope you remember open-ended questions, closed-ended questions, directing questions, exploring or probing questions. You'll see on the second part of your handy-dandy handout on panel 2, there are examples of exploring questions. Okay, so instead of just tell me more about, if you'll remember from your training, exploring is they bring something up, they say something that captures your attention, and you go, ooh, I want to hear more about that. Now, it doesn't mean that you just do exploring questions. If you want to direct them, we just talked about suicide intervention, you can direct them into, I'm just getting this vibe, or I'm just curious about, are you thinking about taking your own life? Again, they weren't talking about taking their own life. You're directing them down that path. So please don't see this as all you can do is ask exploring questions. But the idea here is you are exploring. You're finding out. You're digging deep. For some of you, you have the book, Exploring Behind the Distress Door. It's an ebook I wrote. Gave that to some of you all upon request. Feel free to email me anytime if you want to read. I think it's like a 20-page ebook on more information on exploring. If you want more information on that, I'll send you that book. Just send me an email. So tell me more about, what was that like for you? How has it been for you since so-and-so, since this event happened? What's been the worst part for you so far? That's always one of my favorite questions. And what helps you through the day? So you're just gathering and getting more information from that person. You're leaning in to figure out what's going on, what's the crux of the issue, what's the thing they're having the hardest time dealing with. In other words, what's the thing? You're setting up the conversation. Remember, this is a guided conversation. You're setting up the conversation to help you help them. So you're finding out what is it that's going on with you, so that I can turn around and either get some support for you from other resources, or I can address the issues that you let me know about. But I can't help what I don't know, so you have to lean in and explore further.
All right, so listening out, you'll recall this from training. This is a majority of a day when we talk about assessing a situation and what we're actually listening out for. And you remember we talk about being a situation or event being personal, powerful, and unexpected. And those things kind of being the prerequisite of what we're listening for, listening out for, of how powerful the situation is, how personal is it to the person that they're talking to. If it's, several people removed, or this happened to somebody else, then it may not be as personal as you think it is, but it still may be powerful if it brings up something. But you're listening out for those things of how you're going to assess the situation or event. What was the catalyst in it? What was going on? And what you're listening out for is kind of the severity of it. And we talk about in our trainings several different ways that you can come up with your own types of gauges for that. But the three words that we use a lot of times are mild, moderate, and severe. So if a situation is mild, that has to be what you're assessing is it mild to them? Is it moderate to them? Is it severe to them? Our judgments of that really don't matter. What may be extremely severe to someone else could be very mild to you and me, according to the situation. And one of those examples I've thrown out before is my own niece, who had a little breakup at 13 years old. It was the end of the world for her. For me, I had just dealt with a suicide person that day. A lot of things had happened to me, and I'm thinking, oh wow, this is really not that bad. But I had to meet her where she was. So thinking in terms of that, removing yourself, stepping back and being objective as to what they're bringing to you. But that's what you're listening out for. And you're listening out that through stress reactions. What's going on following the situation or the event? How is it affecting their thinking, their feeling, their doing and behaving, and then their belief system and their physical reactions? And if you listen out for those, this is just a reminder as you're walking through that, to really point out. And if you've been in our trainings, you know how much time we spend on that, up to what are those thinking words? How are they putting their thoughts together? What are their feelings in it? What's their body doing? Those are the things we're listening out for. So that's that part 3 that you're really watching out for as we walk through it.
Oh, great. Okay. So let's pause. Let's see. Yeah, we go into provide care next. So let's pause here for a second. What questions do you have on steps 1, 2, and 3? Show up, lean in, listen out. Do you have any questions so far on those 3 before we get into now we're addressing and providing care and offering hope?
You were incredibly thorough, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. Right. Good. Okay. All right. So here we have, by the way, let's, you'll notice the only thing that you're doing right now, 3 out of 6 steps. So half of your steps involves showing up, building rapport, being present, listening, asking questions, learning from that person, where they are in their world, what's going on with them. And then you're internally assessing, you're lining up, you're teeing up what I can help them with and what I'm going to need to refer them on. But you'll notice the first half, the first 3 of 6 steps are not deliberately fixing steps. Did you notice that? So we always say in our trainings, especially to new peers, what is the number one sin, if you will, the number one, faux pas, often we say a rookie mistake, and we're all rookies. We've all been rookies at one point in time. So Joey, what do we always say is a rookie mistake? Do you need to unmute?
Trying to fix something.
Yeah, too quick to fix.
Being too quick to fix. I'm
there
sorry.
You go. That's all right. I saw your lips moving. So I also didn't prep you for that question. So I didn't know if you were like, I don't know. I didn't remember. I'm not sure. Yes, too quick to fix. So you'll notice, peers, the first 3 of the 6 steps, I know I'm repeating myself, you are not in a fixing pattern. You are strictly in a What can we say for some of our law enforcement? Recon, you were simply in a gathering information kind of thing. Okay, so now we're moving into part 4 of our 6-part protocol. So part 4 is providing care. And so Joey's just set up for you mild, moderate, and severe. For some of you, we actually taught you 1, 2, 3 SSD. 1, 2, 3 SSD. So if they're mild, then you want to offer them a supportive approach. Mild, they are not freaking out. Their hair is not on fire. Their world has not fallen apart. There's a little bump in their road. They may feel a little uncertain about something. They could go right. They could go left. They could go this way. They could go that. There's not massive confusion. There's just, I'm not quite sure. Your role in this part is just to present and be supportive. They've got their brain in their head. They're not back in their traumatic emotional part of their brain. Their front part of their brain is firing perfectly. It's just they need a sounding board. They're in a mild state and they just need to throw out some ideas. A quick example, for many of you, you may know this about me. If you've ever gotten a voicemail that's 4 minutes long from me, Andrea, I know you have. Joey, I know you have. I call it therapeutic voicemail. I'll call you, I'll leave a voicemail, and I work out my entire problem on your voicemail. And then I say, I'm good. You don't need to call me back unless you want to. Joey, I'm gonna call him out since we're buddies and partners. He said, can I say that? You don't know what I'm gonna say. He's actually said he's responded. My voicemail is so long that he actually responds to my voicemail as if we're on the phone chatting. That's how long I leave voicemails. But anyway, so that's me being in a very mild state. I appreciate the call back, but I just needed to voice it out. I'm an external processor, so I need to hear it out loud. And then of course I get the lovely support back from the people in my life that goes, sound good to me, or consider this, or don't forget that. And then of course, later on a follow-up, how did that go? Very mild, very supportive. The second part is moderate. So they've got some things going on and there's a little bit of jumble. There's a little bit of confusion. There's some emotion attached to that. There's some charge that's attached to that. And they need some suggestions. Okay, we'll talk in a second about some examples like exploring options. So they'll need some suggestions. Have you considered this? What would it be like with that? That kind of things. And a lot of this also is exploring. You can hear that as well. They're going to make decisions that they believe are best for themselves. Let me say that again. They're going to make decisions that they believe are best for themselves. So you're not making decisions for them. You're just offering suggestions. And then they're going to pick up on that. I called a friend of mine yesterday and said, I don't know, I'm dealing with this and that. And my friend goes, well, here's what's helped for me. And I go, oh, that's such a great idea. I'm going to try that. And then we ended it with, well, fake it till you make it, kind of thing. I don't know if I was completely immoderate, but I appreciated her saying, I've been there, I've done that. I've gone through something similar. Here's what I did that helped me. And I grabbed a hold of it and went, that's a great attitude. That's a great spirit. I'm going to take that as well and try that out. And then I'll call you back and let you know how it went. So suggestive. And then third is directed. That's severe. This is the person is no longer operating in their front brain. You've been there and done that. You know what I mean by that. We teach this in training constantly, that they are in a full state of crisis. Up is down, left is right. You remember the stick figure I draw that the guy's leaning over off his balance beam or off his teeter-totter, his seesaw. This person is just in shock. If you get to them right away, they're truly in a state of shock. Like they probably don't need to be driving. I've actually asked if I could take the car keys from the person and said, I'd like to drive you myself. They're definitely not in their right brain. They're not thinking clearly. Some of you cognitions may have caught that. They're fully in the right side of their brain. They're not thinking rationally and logically. So this is when you need to step in, we step in, and we're more directive. We're more to the point. This is the thing that a peer did when I was on a call out. He grabbed a water bottle. He took the cap off the water bottle, threw the cap in the trash, and handed it to the person and said, I need to see you drink this, or I need you to drink this. I love the idea of throwing the cap in the trash because you can't cap it back. I thought that was really clever. I've never done that before, but I thought that was kind of neat. So they just sat there and drank water in front of us for a little while. I've had people say, hold their cell phone and say, I don't remember how to get to my contacts. And I go, not a problem. Hand me your phone, unlock it for me. Who are you looking for? I need to call my wife. Not a problem. And so you're directing that. Or you may say, is there someone I can call? Can I call your partner? Can I call your spouse? Can I call your wife? Whatever. And so you're directing that to get them to the next minutes and hours, really. You're not even dealing with days. You're just moving them through the next few minutes and hours. We use this model, 1, 2, 3 SSD. I was teaching a class many, many years ago, and we were dealing with a mild scenario, and people, the peers in the peer training were saying, water, water. We got to get them water. You need to talk to somebody. You need to exercise. Water, water, water. And finally, the person was like, okay, calm down. I'm not freaking out. I just need a sounding board, someone to listen as I'm talking through this. And it dawned on me as the teacher, because I hadn't come up with this model yet, that we need to gauge the person in front of them and then respond to them accordingly. Not every tool in our toolbox fits every project we have in our house. We have special tools for those projects. And that's as far as that metaphor can take me, because I don't know what's in my toolbox. I'm grateful there's a person in my house that does. But anyway, so I do know enough to say there's this tool that goes, probably I don't know that. But anyway, so the same for you when they're in a mild situation. Don't panic and you need to sit down. I need to make a call for you. I'm going to drive you home. That's going to look very bizarre and seem very strange to the individual you're working with. So you meet them where they are, not they meet you where you are. Okay, so that's a quick overview of 1, 2, 3 SSD. Now, providing care, Joey mentioned on the slide 1, we continue to validate first. Validate what? Always. You're exactly right. Everybody, hopefully everyone would have gotten that right away. Validate, because oh gosh, if you had a quarter for every time we say that in training. Validate first, validate always. So you're continuing to provide that care. You're reflecting those feelings back to them. I hear that you're struggling. I can clearly see that you're upset. It makes perfect sense to be where you are on this. So reflecting feelings, mild, moderate, and severe, that's always your go-to. It's your best tool in your toolbox. It fits any and every occasion. If that's all you do, gold star for you. And the person will automatically feel better, because validation is a form of acknowledging the human being in their moment of suffering. And we crave acknowledgement. We need that. I see you. I've got you. It makes sense. What you're going through, your experiences are normal, even though the situation that you just went through is not. Okay, we all want to feel normal when we're in crisis. Instead, we feel crazy. Okay, so these are just some examples of ways that we provide care. You'll notice they all start with R. Hopefully, and this is on your sheet as well. Okay, so on panel 3 as your quick guide. They all start with R in a way to help, just really a way to help you remember these things as you go through. So reflect feelings. That's good for any occasion. Reframe distorted thoughts. If you need a refresh on reframing, that was our last webinar we did in March. And so feel free to go back. It's 36 minutes long. Feel free to go back and take a look at that reframing webinar that we did. And you'll find, if you were on that webinar, if you go back and check it out, or if you remember from class, you'll remember that we only reframe distorted thoughts. If it's a not distorted thought, just validate it. I made a mistake. If they really truly made that mistake, then you go, I hear you made a mistake. And then you just move on to the next thing. So we only reframe distorted thoughts. That's a mostly number 2 suggestive. We do not reframe distorted thoughts when they're in a severity situation, because their thoughts are all over the place. They need to come down off that charge out of that severe place, you are literally just helping them get through the minutes and hours. When they get back into their brain is when they get back to a 2. And that's when you'll start to hear those distorted thoughts come out. I'm the one that killed him. I should have seen this coming. This is all my fault. I'm responsible for all of this, that kind of stuff. And so that's when you step in and reframe distorted thoughts. Speaking of severity, reestablish routine is definitely for a high 3 situation, so a severe situation. What is it that you need to be doing in the next few minutes and hours? And let's make a plan to do that together. It gives them a sense of control. So reconnecting those beliefs gives them back a sense of power and control. What would you normally be doing in this situation? Is that something that you need to be doing right now? That kind of stuff. If you don't need to be at work after the loss of so-and-so, then let's talk about how can I help move you through letting people know, getting permission or whatever your process is to taking some time off or things like that. So you're walking them, you're holding their hand through this until their brain comes back in their head. Repair the body is also mostly a severe situation. We encourage exercise. You heard me say water. We encourage hydrating. Rest when you can and when you feel tired, where you can. We eat for nutrition, so we use food for fuel instead of food for enjoyment. This is not the time to go out and get that chimichanga that you've always wanted. It's probably not going to sit well with you in a high 3 situation. So we talk mostly when people are in a severe state, we normally just talk about things to help you with your body and then things to help you get back into your routine until they get back into that 2, that moderate state. And then we talk about their thoughts while we're always talking about their feelings. And then finally, reconnecting these beliefs, helping them with trust. No time to go into it with this webinar, but those beliefs are trust, safety, power, control, and fairness. And we've talked about that in other webinars, like the reframing webinar. We talked about that, and we talk about it a lot in your class. If they've lost trust, what are some ways that you can reestablish trust or help them see that just because this person betrayed you or broke a promise doesn't mean the whole world is that way, or what are the people in your world that can help you with restore a sense of trust and that kind of thing. So it says reconnect beliefs. You can also use the word restore belief, help them restore beliefs as well. I know that's a lot. This is most of the work. These 2 slides coming up are most of the work that you're going to be doing in the active helping part. But again, this is just an overview. So Joey, help us with offering hope.
Okay, so just certainly as a continuation, as Dory said, we're trying to help this person at this point move forward, taking next steps and what those steps may be. And part of offering hope is a perspective. It's called strengths-based perspective, and that's hurting people often see themselves as weak, so they're coming to you with no answers, and they're thinking, I don't know what to do. I don't know what foot to put in front of the next one. I'm not sure what's going on with me, whatever that may be. And especially those who are in a high 3, as they begin to come out of the traumatic part of it and are kind of able to listen, you're able to point some of those things out. So if you've spent time with this person and you've done your reconnaissance, as Dory put it a while ago, and you've asked the questions, you've learned a lot about this individual. And they've told you things that as you kind of maybe file those things back in your mind, this is the time that you can kind of go into Jedi mind tricks, as we call them sometimes, and bring some of those things back up. I remember at the beginning of our conversation, you said something about how your relationship is with your mother and how important that relationship is. And you always lean on her for some great advice, and she's helped you through some things. That's when you bring those things back up. So when it comes down to it, you're talking to an individual. It's a statement that you can kind of keep in your mind is, I'm seeing you and not your problem. So you're able to step back and go, okay, I'm not focused on the problem this person has. Now I'm focused on you as an individual, and what do you bring to the table? So as they're unpacking all of this, you're pointing out those things that they they have strength in. It may be their faith. It may be the safety net of people around them. It may be that they're a good listener. Or you put it back on them. If somebody came to you and was telling you the same story, what would you tell them?
Mm-hmm.
So it's allowing them to kind of answer those questions as they're walking through it. Click that next slide, Dory.
Yeah.
Okay, so some examples of this, some practical examples, and I know we're approaching short on time. So again, we're not trying to reteach this. I'm not going to read these to you, but I just want to point out to you some examples of those strengths that you can use in a scenario, and practice these as you have this card. Go back through these slides as you have a copy of it. Just kind of keep these things in mind. And again, I'm not going to read them to you. So let's click on to the next one, Dory.
Well, for those that are on the phone call, though, would you give just one example?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me do that. I forgot. I'm sorry about that, you folks that are either driving or just on the call. So a couple of these are, as I mentioned, the support system, people who love you, people who are there to support you in these situations. Patience is a very important one, to see how some things kind of to play out. It may be exercise, a safe place to sleep, breathing. I mentioned faith. So some of these things are just some examples that you use, and those folks who are on the phone really, really want you to of course, download the slide deck and look at these things, and you'll remember some of these things from our training as well. But just being attentive, I think, is such an important part of this, because you're going to hear them talk about things. I don't know very many people who come to the table with nothing. Mm-hmm. They think they have nothing, but I think a part of our responsibility in this is helping them to see it. So the final part of this and offering hope is, and some of you have been in our class, we've used this clip from This Is Us, the TV show, when the doctor is with the young man who's they've had triplets, and one of the triplets didn't make it, and we put the quote on here for you. But borrowing someone else's story of strength or faith, and then borrowing their story of meaning and overcoming is very important. And that goes back to that I'm seeing you, not your problem. Maybe a story that you have, and discerning when it's appropriate to use that, not as one-upsmanship that, oh man, I had this problem, this is how I handle it. Right. But like Dory said a while ago, this is a place that I've been, and this is what I did. It may be right for you, it may not be, but there may be pieces of this story that you could possibly use. It's just something to help you take your next step.
Awesome. And then also, this is panel 4 on your handout. So ID identifies strengths, skills, and resources for that person. Again, what Joey was saying is they may not know what tools are already in their toolbox. And just like a good neighbor, you can loan them some of the tools that you have. That's what Joey means by borrowing. For those of you that are people of faith on the phone call, our chaplains and others, this is why we pray with people. And we're the ones that are offering prayer, because if you've ever been in a situation where you've got nothing, and someone comes along and says, I want to pray with you and for you, you are sharing your faith and you're sharing their strength with them, and they get to borrow that for a little time until they get their legs back under them. One of the questions on this card is, what is your hope, wish, prayer for this person that they may wish to borrow? It's their choice, until they find their own faith footing. That's the question that just reflects what I just shared. By the way, on panel number 4, these are not questions that you necessarily need to ask them. I didn't write this for you to ask them. These are questions that you are asking yourself as a peer. What am I seeing in this person that they're not seeing in themselves? And then what can I share with them that I see as potential and strength and skill and hope that they can find for themselves?
Thanks for that clarification.
Sure. And yeah, go back to we're teaching the toolkit today, so go back to that as well. And then finally, follow up and refer. I'll go through this really quickly because we spend a lot of time on this also in your training. The fortune is in the follow-up. What is the point of peer support? Some of you talk about, which I'm so glad you do, creating a culture of care in your agency and in your organization. Follow-up is one of the ways that we demonstrate that we care for you. You send the message that you matter. Everyone shows up when the tragedy strikes. Everyone shows up. What really sends the message is what Joey calls when the casseroles stop coming. When the casseroles are gone, and that's a reference if you're not familiar here in the South, and especially among churches, when there's a death or a tragedy, everyone brings a casserole. I don't know why, that's just what we do. So when the casserole stops showing up and then you show up after that, wow, you're telling them I remembered. You're telling them I'm going to walk with you through this. This isn't just a one-shot Sally situation. So really, you send a huge message. Again, part 1 is showing up. Part 6 also is continuing to show up by following up. Okay. Set a reminder or add it to your calendar, especially if it's a private calendar. Again, we don't want any confidential information escaping and getting with people who don't need to see it, but set a calendar, anniversaries. I've gotten into the habit of doing that. I don't expect me to remember everything. And so when there's a death of a loved one with someone that I care about deeply, I put that on my calendar and then set an alarm and follow up with them maybe a couple of days before. Hey, I know we're coming up on the anniversary of so-and-so, your wife's death or something. And by the way, we can talk about this offline or in class or whatever, but some people go, well, aren't I reminding them? If you remember the Cheryl Strong Sandberg video we started showing in Grief and Loss, you're not reminding them that they lost their parent. You're not reminding them that they lost their child. You're not reminding them that the anniversary of their spouse is coming up. They're well aware that this is the first Mother's Day without their mother. And for those of you, maybe you can echo that as well. For those of you that have experienced loss, you're not reminding me that I lost my dog. I know it every day. I love this guy like my son. So, but to have someone say, oh, I had a thought about, and I just wanted to think about you, and I'm letting you know I'm sending prayers or whatnot, to me feels good. You'll get the feeling if it doesn't from the person. So when to stop following up is when you get the all good. I feel good. A lot of you have the policy after 1 to 3 times. I will say when a new issue or a new event arises, because one thing can lead to another, can lead to another, can lead to another. To me, check with your coordinators, but for me, that's a new issue. That's a new situation, and the protocol starts all over again. But when you get the all good, I'm good, then that's a good time to say great. And then of course, if there's an anniversary of a loss, then you can follow up then as well. When to refer, when you're stuck when that person is stuck and they're not making any movement whatsoever, and they're not moving to feeling better, because that's the key. At the end of our call, at the end of our visit, hopefully you feel a little bit better. And if you don't, then that might be something that you need to refer. I call it the ruminating roller coaster. When you get them up, they're feeling much better, but then they go back to thinking this terrible tragedy, and then they fall back down, and you work them up to getting, okay, I see the light, and then they go back to, and they keep going back to, and it keeps dropping back down. And within 45 minutes, you're exhausted, you're emotionally exhausted, you're mentally exhausted. You may want to refer that as well. If it's beyond your skill level, or if you don't have enough time to devote to the individual, make a referral. It's not a sign of weakness. You're getting them to the person that can help them with the time that they have available. That's a noble act. Who to refer to, just see your agency policy on that. My final slide, and then Joey's going to tell you your grad challenge, is we started with your starting point, negative outlook, depressed mood, not feeling well. Someone says, how do I know when I'm being successful? How do I know I had a good visit with the person? They feel better. They have a little bit more hope. They have some options. They have a path. They have some decisions that they can make, or they feel empowered to make a decision. Even if it's just, I'm going to go home and go to sleep. That's a decision that you made, and you're committing to your self-care to get some rest. So that's a good decision. They feel a little bit more confident than they did when you first started. So there's some guidelines on how do I know they feel a little bit better, because that's what it looks like. Joey?
All right. So your challenge after this is over is we want you to definitely print out the card if you've not already done that. So those of you who are on the phone call, maybe you did it, just could not be on your computer today, but please print out the card, practice folding it. If we need to rewind the video, you can practice folding it up so you'll have it where you can flip it around, and just become familiar with it. I think it's a great guide, a great tool to have in your pocket to, right before you sit down with somebody, or if you're comfortable having it out or you want to explain to them. This is just something that just kind of keeps me on track, and I want to make sure we cover everything today. That's okay as well, but we would really try for you to just be aware of it and not have to use it. It just provides more presence to keep making eye contact with somebody the whole time you're with them. Keep it with you. And the best thing that we can get from you is your feedback. So something in here as you're using it, and you're like, it would make more sense if this was over here, or if this said this, or if you could add this to it. Please give us that feedback. We're a very fluid company, and love to grow and continue to make things more practical, more usable. When we're all out in the field, it makes sense. So that's where it comes from, our expertise of being in front of people. But we're all different. So if you have a suggestion, please don't hesitate to shoot us that information.
Hey, Dory, it's Andrea and Joey. I just want to thank you guys so much for this. I did think about when you were on the referral slide that oftentimes we forget we can refer within our own team, because someone else just may have a skill or have some kind of connection with that person, whereas we're stuck on being able to support them, we can refer to someone else on our team.
That's a really great point, Andrea. Thank you for making it. And I highly recommend peer-to-peer. Check your policy to make sure that it needs to still be in confidence. And most policies do reflect that you can talk to your own team member and maintain that confidentiality within that. But I want to just make sure you're talking with your coordinator or confirming that with your policy. But I'm a big fan of peer-to-peer. It also helps you debrief with your teammate as well. It gives them new ideas. You get new ideas back from them, and then also maybe gives you a chance to talk with them further. Please, go ahead.
Just wanted to ask you in terms of, I love the protocol. I think it's just a very quick and easy way for us all to remember kind of the steps. And just, wanted to ask you with regards to, folks that come in that have like repetitive issues, how would you answer just kind of keeping them, if they start to get scattered and, the ruminating and all that, how does the peer then kind of cipher out what the employee or the person really wants to talk about, and how the peer can hone in on just kind of what the primary would be, and if they, not that that's the peer's job, but then how do they get them kind of cohesive to figure out how to help them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would, so to keep with our toolkit, on the piece of paper, the exploring questions, to me, the quick answer is that's an exploring question. And the question that I would ask that we cover in training also, for some of you might be familiar, we call it the whiteboard question or the magic eraser question. And so if you've got a person in front of you with, 7, sometimes 18 different things going on. I mean, there's just so much on this person's plate. And you can say, okay, so if I were to take everything that you're dealing with, which is a ton, so validate first, validate always, and I'm going to throw it up on a magical whiteboard or a dry erase board or whatever, and I have a magic eraser and I can erase one of those issues for you today, what would help you today? And so and what's interesting is, it always surprises me every time I ask that question. I'm thinking in my mind, this has to be the worst thing, like just dealing with this one thing. And I always am surprised when I ask that question, the person comes back and goes, if I could just get some information on blah, blah, blah. And you're like, real? yeah, sure, I can do that. But you put it back with them and say, what's going to help alleviate stress for you today? What can I magically erase? Knowing you're not saying you have superpowers. You say, I don't have a magic wand. I always used to say my magic wand is in the shop. I don't have a magic wand, but if I did, what would be the thing that I could help you erase today that would help you feel better? And
Okay.
that hones that down, that narrows that down into, I've got 17 things going on, but I really, really need this one thing off my plate, or I need this to help better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.